My mother looked me straight in the eye and lied. She's always been dramatic and unstable, Your Honor. I've witnessed it since she was a teenager. Hit subscribe and drop a comment telling me where you're from. It means the world to see people connecting with these stories from every corner of the globe. I'll never forget the sound of the courtroom that day. The fluorescent lights humming overhead. The scratch of the court reporter's fingers on her machine. The way my 5-year-old daughter, Emma, was coloring in the hallway outside, completely unaware that her grandmother was destroying me. Judge Patricia Morrison looked at my mother with sympathy. My mother, Rebecca Walsh, sat in the witness box wearing her church clothes and that expression she'd perfected over 63 years. The concerned parent. The reasonable woman just trying to tell the truth. Mrs. Walsh, my ex-husband's attorney, said gently, "Can you give the court specific examples of your daughter's instability?" My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the edge of the defendant's table. My lawyer, a overworked public defender named Tom Chen, started to object, but my mother was already talking. She threw dishes once during an argument with Daniel. She screamed at him in public. She refused to take medication that her doctor prescribed. Each word was carefully chosen. Each statement twisted just enough to sound damning. What she didn't mention was that I'd thrown one plate after Daniel had shoved me into a wall. That I'd yelled at him in a grocery store parking lot because he'd grabbed my arm so hard it left bruises. That the medication was sleeping pills Daniel had pressured a doctor friend to prescribe after I'd told him I wanted a divorce. Your Honor, Daniel's attorney continued, Mrs. Walsh has submitted a written statement detailing her daughter's erratic behavior over the past 3 years. She believes, in her professional opinion as a retired school counselor, that her granddaughter would be safer in Mr. Foster's primary custody. The gavel came down 2 hours later. Daniel got primary custody. I got supervised visitation every other weekend. Emma was 5 years old, and I was allowed to see my own daughter for 4 hours on Saturdays with a court-appointed supervisor watching my every move. I was 28 years old. Working as a receptionist at a dental office making $9 an hour. Living in a studio apartment in the worst part of Portland where police sirens were the soundtrack to every night. And my mother had just helped my abuser take my child away. I called her that night from my car parked outside her house in the suburbs. The house where I'd grown up. Where she still lived in the same neighborhood where everyone knew everyone's business. "Mom, how could you do that to me?" My voice was raw from crying all day. "You know what he did to me. You saw the bruises." Her response was ice cold. "I saw a troubled marriage, Jessica. I saw you pushing a good man away with your dramatics. Daniel provides stability. Emma needs stability. He hit me, Mom. He controlled every dollar I spent. He isolated me from my friends. Marriage is hard, Jessica. You don't just run away when things get difficult. I stayed with your father through harder times than you've ever known." That sentence broke something inside me. My father had died when I was 16. Heart attack at 54. But before he died, I'd heard the fights. Seen my mother's careful makeup covering shadows under her eyes. Found her crying in the bathroom more times than I could count. She'd stayed. And she'd decided that's what I should have done too. "I'll never forgive you for this," I whispered. "You'll thank me someday when Emma grows up in a stable home." She hung up. I sat in that car for 3 hours, watching lights turn on and off in her windows, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. The next morning, I had my first supervised visit with Emma. She was confused about why a stranger was sitting in the corner watching us play with dolls in a sad office that smelled like bleach and old coffee. "Mommy, why can't I come home with you?" she asked. I had to explain to my 5-year-old that a judge said she had to live with Daddy now. Watching her little face crumple destroyed me in ways I didn't know were possible. Daniel used that custody arrangement like a weapon for the next 3 years. He'd cancel my visits last minute claiming Emma was sick. He'd coach her to say things to the supervisor about how I made her nervous. He'd show up to exchanges with his new girlfriend, making sure I saw them playing happy family with my daughter. My mother never apologized. Never even acknowledged what she'd done. She'd see Emma regularly at Daniel's house. Post pictures on Facebook of grandmother-granddaughter days. Pictures I wasn't in. Moments I was erased from. I survived those years on rage and determination. The rage at my mother, at Daniel, at a system that believed a charming man over a woman with bruises. The determination to never let this happen to anyone else. I was working at that dental office when I met Dr. Patricia Morrison. Not the judge. Different person. This Patricia Morrison was a patient who came in for a root canal and ended up changing my life. She was a family law attorney. 56 years old. Tough as iron. She'd been practicing for 30 years, specializing in domestic violence cases. "You're wasted here," she told me one day while I was checking her out after an appointment. "I've watched you handle difficult patients for 6 months now. You've got something. Intelligence. Steel. Why are you answering phones?" I almost laughed. "Because I'm a single mother with supervised visitation and no college degree. This is the best I can do." That's absolutely not true. She handed me her business card. "Come work as a paralegal at my firm. I'll pay for you to take night classes. Get your bachelor's degree, then law school. I need people who understand what these cases really mean. I can't afford." I said I'll pay for it. Consider it an investment. You work for me, you study, you become the kind of attorney these victims desperately need. I started the following Monday. Patricia Morrison became the mother figure I'd lost. She was demanding, brilliant, and she saw potential in me that I'd forgotten existed. I took classes at Portland State University at night. Business administration first, then pre-law courses. I studied between visits with Emma. I read case law on lunch breaks. I lived on 4 hours of sleep and coffee that tasted like burnt regret. Daniel fought me every step of the way. When I filed motions to modify custody, he'd counter with motions claiming I was unstable for obsessing over my education instead of my daughter. When I graduated with my bachelor's degree 3 years after starting, he told Emma I was being selfish chasing fancy degrees. But something shifted when I took the LSAT. I scored in the 94th percentile. Top law schools in the region offered me acceptance letters. Northwestern School of Law at Lewis and Clark gave me a full scholarship. The supervised visits ended when Emma turned 8. The court evaluator finally saw through Daniel's manipulation. I got joint custody. Real custody where Emma stayed with me 3 days a week and I didn't have strangers watching us. The first night Emma slept in my apartment, a better one by then, 2 bedrooms in a safe neighborhood, I sat on her bed and watched her sleep for hours. 3 years of supervised visits. 3 years of my mother's betrayal echoing in custody hearings. "I'm going to become a lawyer," I whispered to my sleeping daughter. "I'm going to help people like us. And no one will ever take you away from me again." Law school was brutal. I was 32 years old studying alongside 25-year-olds who'd never had to explain gaps in their resume or supervised visitation schedules. But I'd lived what most of them had only read about in textbooks. Patricia hired me as a law clerk during my 2nd year. I worked on domestic violence cases, drafted motions, researched precedents. I sat with women who looked exactly like I had 5 years earlier. Desperate. Terrified. Convinced the system would fail them. "You're going to be extraordinary at this," Patricia told me one late night as we prepared for a custody trial. "You have something most attorneys never get. You've been in their shoes. You know what losing feels like." I graduated top of my class. Passed the bar exam on the first try. Patricia made me a junior associate at her firm the day I got my results. That was 7 years ago. Now I'm 39 years old. Named partner at Morrison and Foster Family Law. Yes, I kept my married name professionally. It reminds me every day where I came from and why I do this work. I've handled over 200 domestic violence cases. One custody for mothers who'd been told they were too unstable, too poor, too broken. I've testified as an expert witness in family court reform hearings. Written articles for legal journals about coercive control and judicial bias. Last year, a national legal magazine named me one of the top family law attorneys in the Pacific Northwest. The headline was From Victim to Victor, How Jessica Foster Rebuilt the System That Failed Her. Emma is 15 now. Smart, strong, nothing like the confused 5-year-old who colored in hallways while her family fell apart. She knows everything about what happened. Not because I badmouthed her father, I never did, but because she grew up watching me fight for other families. She asked questions. I answered honestly. Daniel remarried. Had 2 more kids. He's mostly civil now, probably because his new wife doesn't tolerate his control issues. Emma sees him every other week, and I've made peace with the fact that he's her father even if he was a terrible husband. But my mother. I haven't spoken to Rebecca Walsh in 10 years. Not at Emma's elementary school graduation. Not at Christmas dinners where I'd arrange for Emma to visit her separately. Not ever. She tried reaching out a few times over the years. Birthday cards that I returned unopened. Emails that I deleted. Messages through Emma that I politely declined. Why won't you talk to Grandma? Emma asked me once when she was 12. Because what she did to us wasn't a mistake, sweetheart. It was a choice. And some choices break things that can't be fixed. Then last Tuesday, my assistant Sarah knocked on my office door during lunch. Jessica, there's a Rebecca Walsh online too. Says she's your mother. Should I tell her I'm not available? She says it's urgent. Legal matter. My stomach dropped. I stared at that blinking light on my phone for 30 seconds before picking up. This is Jessica Foster. My voice was pure ice. Professional. Jessica. My mother's voice sounded older. Smaller. I know you don't want to hear from me, but I need your help. I need a lawyer, and you're the best one I know. The audacity was breathtaking. There are hundreds of attorneys in Portland, Rebecca. Don't call me that. I'm your mother. Mothers don't do what you did. My hand tightened around the phone. What's the legal matter? She explained. My mother had been working part-time at an estate planning firm after retiring from school counseling. She'd made an error on a client's trust documents. A significant error. The client had died, and now their heirs were suing her for malpractice. $3 million in damages. Her insurance only covered $1 million. I could lose my house, Jessica. My retirement savings. Everything. Find another attorney. I've called 12 firms. Everyone says the case is too complicated. Or they know who you are and they don't want to go against you. I don't practice malpractice defense. Please. Her voice cracked. You're my daughter. I know I hurt you, but family is supposed to. Family? The word exploded out of me. You testified against me in court. You called me unstable. You helped Daniel take Emma away from me for 3 years. 3 years where I saw my daughter for 4 hours every other weekend with a stranger watching us. Do you know what that did to me? To Emma. Silence on the other end. I became a lawyer because of you, I continued. Because I needed to make sure no mother ever had to sit in a courtroom and watch her own parent destroy her life. I thought I was doing the right thing, she whispered. Daniel seemed so stable, and you were so emotional, Anne. I was being abused. I was standing now, pacing my office. I had bruises, Mom. Evidence. And you chose to believe him over me. I know. God, Jessica, I know. I've regretted it every single day for 10 years. Then why didn't you apologize? Why didn't you call me, come to me, admit you were wrong? Because I was ashamed. She was crying now. Because I couldn't face what I'd done. Because every time I saw Emma and she talked about you, about your cases, about the women you help, I realized I'd been on the wrong side. I was the villain in your origin story. That phrase stopped me cold. The villain in your origin story. I need to think about this, I said. Don't call me again. I'll call you. I hung up and sat at my desk for an hour staring at nothing. Patricia found me there when she came back from court. She took one look at my face and closed the door. What happened? I told her everything. The phone call. My mother's lawsuit. The 10 years of silence. What are you going to do? Patricia asked. I don't know. Half of me wants to let her lose everything. Let her feel what consequences actually mean. And the other half remembers that she raised me. That before the divorce, before Daniel, she was a good mother. That somewhere in her twisted logic, she thought she was protecting Emma. Patricia sat across from me. I'm going to tell you something I've never told anyone. My mother testified for my abusive ex-husband too. Different circumstances, but same outcome. She thought she was helping. Thought I was being dramatic about bruises and threats. My eyes went wide. Patricia, I never knew. I never forgave her. She died 5 years ago, and we hadn't spoken in 20 years. And you know what? I regret it. Not because she deserved forgiveness, but because carrying that anger for 2 decades poisoned parts of me I didn't even realize were dying. She stood up. I'm not telling you what to do. But I am telling you that whatever you decide, make it a decision you can live with in 20 years. Make it about who you want to be, not who she was. I went home that night and Emma was doing homework at the kitchen table. 15 years old. Strong. Beautiful. Nothing like the scared little girl who'd lost 3 years with her mother. Mom, you look stressed, she said, looking up from her calculus textbook. Grandma Rebecca called me today. Emma's expression shifted. She knew the history. What did she want? I explained the lawsuit, the request for help, my confusion about what to do. Do you want to know what I think? Emma asked. Always. I think Grandma made a terrible mistake. I think she hurt you in a way that's almost unforgivable. But I also think you're not the same person you were 10 years ago. You're stronger now. Helping her wouldn't make you weak. It might actually prove how strong you've become. When did you get so wise? I learned from watching you help people who've been hurt. You always say that healing isn't about revenge. It's about breaking cycles. I called my mother the next morning. I'll review your case. If I think there's a defense, I'll consider taking it. But there are conditions. Anything, she said immediately. First, you're going to write a letter. A real letter, not an email. You're going to detail everything you did wrong during my divorce. Every lie, every manipulation, every way you failed me. You're going to acknowledge the damage you caused Emma and me. Okay. Second, you're going to volunteer. 20 hours a month at the domestic violence shelter I work with. You're going to listen to stories from women whose families didn't believe them. You're going to understand what you were part of. I can do that. Third, therapy. You're going to work with a counselor who specializes in family trauma. You're going to understand why you made the choices you made. And you're going to learn how to be the grandmother Emma deserves, not the one who posts fake happy pictures on Facebook. Yes. All of it. Jessica, thank you. I'm not done. If I take this case, I'm not doing it because you're my mother. I'm doing it because everyone deserves a proper defense, even people who've hurt me. You'll pay my full rate, no family discount. And if at any point you slip back into justifying what you did or making excuses, I'm out. Understood. Understood. I spent 3 weeks reviewing her case. The malpractice claim was serious but defensible. My mother had made an error, but it was the kind of mistake that happens in complex estate planning. The heirs were overreaching, claiming damages that weren't fully supported. I took the case. My colleagues thought I was crazy. She testified against you, Sarah said. She helped your abuser. Why would you help her? Because I'm not her, I said simply. I'm not someone who abandons people when they need help, even if they abandoned me. The trial lasted 2 weeks. I cross-examined witnesses, presented expert testimony on estate planning standards, and built a defense that showed my mother's error, while regrettable, didn't rise to the level of malpractice the plaintiffs claimed. My mother sat at the defense table looking small and old. She'd aged dramatically in the 10 years since I'd seen her up close. Grey hair, deeper wrinkles, hands that shook when she took notes. During breaks, we didn't chat like normal attorneys and clients. We maintained professional distance. But I caught her watching me with something that looked like awe. On the 6th day of trial, during lunch recess, she finally spoke beyond case discussion. "You're remarkable in that courtroom. The way you command respect, the way you protect me even though you have every reason to hate me." "I don't hate you," I said, not looking up from my notes. "Hate requires energy I don't have to spare. I finished the letter you asked for. All 12 pages. Would you like to read it?" "Not yet. Maybe after this is over." The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They found in favor of my mother on the primary malpractice claim, though they did award the plaintiffs a smaller amount for administrative errors. $250,000 instead of $3 million. Her insurance would cover it entirely. She cried when the verdict was read. Relief, shame, gratitude all mixed together. Outside the courthouse, she tried to hug me. I stepped back. "Thank you," she said. "I know that doesn't begin to cover." "You're right. It doesn't. But you're welcome. Can we talk? Really talk? Maybe get coffee, Anne?" "Not yet. You have work to do first. The volunteering, the therapy, the letter. Do those things because they're right, not because you want my forgiveness." "I've already started. I volunteer at Safe Place Shelter every Saturday morning. I'm in therapy with Dr. Karen Mitchell. I'm trying, Jessica. Then keep trying. Maybe in a year, we can have coffee. Maybe in 2 years, you can have dinner with Emma and me. But you don't get to rush this. You took 3 years of my life with my daughter. Rebuilding trust doesn't happen overnight. 6 months have passed since that trial. My mother sends me updates every few weeks. Not pushing, just informing. She's completed 40 hours of volunteering. She's in therapy twice a month. She wrote an apology letter to Emma that Emma decided to read and actually cried over. Last week, I finally read the 12-page letter my mother wrote me. She detailed everything. Her own abusive marriage with my father that she'd never processed. Her belief that staying was always the right answer. Her jealousy that I'd chosen differently than she had. Her inability to admit she'd been wrong because it meant admitting she'd wasted decades of her own life. "I saw you leaving Daniel," she wrote, "and it felt like judgment of every choice I'd made. So I judged you instead. I called you unstable because I couldn't face that I'd been too weak to leave. I took your daughter away because some terrible part of me wanted you to suffer the way I'd suffered. I'm not asking you to forgive that. I'm just asking you to know that I understand how unforgivable it was." I called her yesterday. She answered on the first ring. "Hi, Mom." She inhaled sharply at that word. "Mom." I hadn't called her that in a decade. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice was shaking. "Emma and I are free next Saturday evening. Would you like to come to dinner? Nothing fancy. Just spaghetti at our place." She was crying. "I would love that more than anything in the world. Ground rules first. No comments about my choices during my marriage. No unsolicited advice about Emma. No attempting to rewrite history. If we do this, we do it honestly. Yes. Absolutely. Jessica, I promise. Also, Emma gets to control how much interaction she wants with you. If she needs space, you respect it. You're earning back the title of grandmother. You don't just get it because of biology. I understand. And Mom, one more thing. I need you to know that I'm doing this partly for you, partly for Emma, but mostly for me. I spent 10 years being defined by what you did to me. I became an attorney because of your betrayal. I helped hundreds of women because I understood their pain. But I don't want to be the woman defined by her mother's worst moment anymore. I want to be the woman who broke that cycle. You already are, she whispered. You've always been braver than I was. We're having that dinner this Saturday. Emma is nervous but willing. I'm cautious but hopeful. My mother is grateful and humble in a way I've never seen from her. I don't know if we'll ever have a normal mother-daughter relationship. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too severe. But I know that forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's not about pretending the past didn't happen. Forgiveness is about refusing to let someone else's worst moment define the rest of your life. 10 years ago, my mother stood in a witness box and called me unstable. She helped my abuser take my daughter away. She chose wrong in the moment I needed her most. Today, I'm a named partner at a prestigious law firm. I've helped hundreds of abuse survivors get their children back, get their lives back, get their power back. I've built a career on making sure no one else has to sit in a courtroom and watch their family betray them. And now I'm having dinner with my mother. Not because she deserves it, but because I deserve to be free of the anger that's shaped me for a decade. Because Emma deserves to know her grandmother if my mother can actually become the person she's working to be. Because healing isn't linear, and forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Success isn't just about the courtroom victories or the professional recognition. It's about the moment you realize you're strong enough to offer grace to someone who showed you none. It's about breaking cycles instead of perpetuating them. That's the real power. Not revenge. Not even justice. The power to choose who you want to be, regardless of who others chose to be toward you. My mother destroyed me once. But I rebuilt myself into something she couldn't break again. And now, from that place of strength, I can decide whether she gets a second chance. That's not weakness. That's victory.